Hey everybody out there, my name is Dragnix and this is Cardinal Quest 2. The game comes out on Steam today and it is $14.99, but it does have a 35% discount during its first week promotional period. It is made by Random 9, this is their first game on Steam, and it's a simplistic roguelike that has 7 classes, 3 acts, and in sort of an endless mode in its tower mode. But before I begin this review, I want to make sure you guys know that this key was obtained from the developer for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion in the end, but you guys should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? As you start the game, there will only be one act available. As you defeat it, you'll go to Act 2, Act 3, and then you'll unlock the Endless Mode, aka the Tower. Now, you'll start the game with only 3 heroes unlocked, the Fighter, the Thief, and the Wizard. But as you go along, you'll unlock the Ranger, the Pugilist, the Alchemist will be the hardest one to unlock for you, but you'll be able to unlock it. You'll also unlock perks and gear for your heroes. These are specifically based on achievements, and I like this system. So as a wizard, clear an act with an enslaved enemy, rack up 200,500 kills will give me a certain perk in order for me to unlock it. I like that system. I want to see a little bit more like this in this game. It gives me reasons to play differently in sort of multiple playthroughs. So the gameplay in question basically has you starting the level and trying to get to the exit in any means necessary. Now that depends on the character you play, of course, but you can just run to the exit. You don't have to actually defeat any enemies, at least in the first couple of levels. Once you get to a boss level, however, you will have to defeat the boss. He'll have a key in order for you to go on to the next level. So the combat in question revolves you walking into enemies and doing melee damage in some cases, but you also have your skill bar. The skill bar will depend on what character you have, at least how you start off with, but as you go through the world, you'll find other skills that actually would be better on other classes, but you still can use them too. So you can sort of construct your character how you want. Do you want to go sort of a stealth route? Do you want to go main attack? It depends on how you want to play in terms of the overall picture. Now, there are nice little touches that I do think help the balance of the game in terms of the overall design. For example, the healing spell that you can find is based not on sort of mana or anything, but it's based on experience gain. So you have to kill enemies in order to sort of reset it at this point. Others are based on sort of cooldowns in terms of timers, and I think there was a good balance of what skills had the one mechanic and what skills had the other mechanic in question. Overall, there's a good balance of sort of challenge versus sort of ease in terms of the game design here. Now, skills are the bread and butter of this game, and the thing is that your skills are going to be based on the stats that your character has. For example, the Magician's Fireball does a lot better with a higher intellect because it recharges faster, and so it's obviously suited for the Magician, but maybe not necessarily suited for the Fighter. That means that you can still have flexibility though. Just because the Fighter doesn't have a great intellect doesn't mean that you can't use the Fireball. It just is a little bit less effective at this point. But that does have a sort of flip side to it. See, the flip side is that unfortunately that doesn't mean that characters feel that unique from each other at this point. Now, granted, every character has a different skill tree and things like that, but when it comes down to it, there are 3 main portions of the game. There's your melee attacks, there's your ranged attacks, and then there's your stealth-based sort of action in terms of getting backstabs and sort of hiding from enemies. Most of the classes sort of throw themselves, into one of those 3 categories, and they all feel like they play the same. One character in particular doesn't play the same, and that's the Alchemist. The reason why is that his skills are more based on items, and the thing is that he's able to have some unique skills that no one else can really get at this point. He's the last one you'll probably unlock, but the thing is that he does feel a lot different from everyone else, and I don't believe he's available in the mobile version of this game. Now, the basic core elements of this combat and this gameplay works, except there's no flash to it. There's no pizzazz to it. There's nothing here that really stands apart from any other game in the genre, and unfortunately, at the $15 price point, it's hard to compare it against games that have more content, like the Enchanted Cave 2, or something that feels a little bit more different, like Talomir. See, it's sort of missing just sort of substance at this point. For example, I could not tell you why this game is named Cardinal Quest 2. There are no Redbirds in it, there are no priests or anyone like that, and the St. Louis Cardinals are definitely not in it, or I'd be taking them down because I'm a Cubs fan. See, the game says that it has 3 story campaigns, but let me rephrase that. There are 3 campaigns. Story doesn't really play a big part into Cardinal Quest 2 at all. In fact, it's sort of void at this point. This game does show its mobile roots in terms of the gameplay and the sort of story in question. There are different expectations for a mobile game versus sort of a Steam game in question, and I felt like it didn't take advantage of the new platform it had to add to it, to add some story, to maybe add a little bit more pizzazz to the game. See, very quickly you'll find out there is not a lot of content behind the doors here. For example, when you're dealing with enemies, you'll start seeing the same enemies over and over again, even in the endless mode. Now, the thing is that even with the different enemies you find, it comes down to that classification of melee, ranged, and stealth that I mentioned before. They don't feel that different from each other. Sure, other enemies have certain skills, or other enemies have certain abilities that will cause you to change your strategy a tiny bit. But in the end, it's going to deal with, you hitting him in the head, or you using a certain spell, like, your ranged spell at this point, back to the melee, ranged, and stealth mechanics. Unfortunately, you don't have a lot of strategy here, and in a turn-based strategy game, unfortunately, that sort of misses the mark. It's too simplistic. That's pretty much on all fronts, in fact. The equipment, for example, you'll start to see the same equipment over and over again. There's not a lot of variety there. You'll start seeing the chainmail, you'll start seeing the leather gloves, for example, and it'll just start to feel the same after a while, even though there are certain items that have unique aspects to it, like certain abilities that the other ones don't have. Even the environments will start to feel the same over and over again. There isn't a lot of variety in terms of the environments, and in fact, it feels like it's just sort of been copied and pasted at certain points. These are procedurally generated levels, and the exit isn't necessarily in the same spot all the time, but the thing is that it won't feel that much different compared to everything else. The lack of substance behind the game hurts it in terms of time frame. First 2 hours, you feel, it's a basic, roguelike, but it does the job a little bit. But then after the third hour, you're playing again and you're just sitting there going, I've played this before. I'm doing the same things over and over again. The only reason I played for this long is I wanted to see what the alchemist did in terms of abilities. And granted, his ability was a little bit different, but the thing was that it didn't feel too different from everybody else. Sure, I was able to combine items, but everybody else was able to use items. I was just able to use them a little bit more often at this point. Unfortunately, after the 3-hour mark, I can say the game didn't have anything new at all to offer me, and even at the 2-hour mark, in fact. The game is also not going to get by on its aesthetic either. It's another pixel art style, which unfortunately doesn't have any uniqueness to it. It feels very rushed together and very sort of bare bones at this point, like no sort of style went into it. Unfortunately, the enemy design and even the character designs, with a few exceptions, don't really feel like the characters that they're trying to portray. It took me a while to figure out what an ogre was in this game. I thought it was just sort of a golem in question in terms of like Golem from Pokemon at this point. But unfortunately, that doesn't help in terms of, bringing the character into the world and immersing them into the world. The systems that are put into place in terms of the game design are very hit and miss as well. For example, it hit on the item system in question. The item system felt balanced compared to the combat in terms of the 5 item slots in question. It gave you enough options during combat when you needed to use these items, but didn't overburden you with like 20 different potions, for example, that you may use in a very specific situation. It also made you make hard decisions at certain points in order to know, okay, wait, maybe I need this invisibility potion as opposed to the speed potion, but I'm not exactly sure at this point. It was a good design there. But other mechanics actually really bring the game down in terms of sort of their implementation and some of the bugs that I would call them at this point. For example, the auto charge mechanic allows you to dash across the screen and, sort of stab somebody in the face with your knife if it has that ability. Now, that's great and all, but the thing is that the auto charge ability was never useful for me for one reason. Your allies, and in particular the merchant in question, would also be affected by this. If I walked up to my ally or the merchant in question, normally, I wouldn't attack them. But because I use the auto charge mechanic, even if I'm like sort of stuck in a corner, I'll end up attacking my ally and unable to do anything. I have to hit the spacebar and hope they walk away at that point. This feels like, a missed implementation, but that really ruined certain elements of the game. And that's not just that element. There were little ones in terms of those abilities, like the vampire ability, that didn't do a good job of explaining exactly what it did. The tooltips didn't necessarily help in that case either. Now, this game is a free-to-play game on the mobile platform, so keep that in mind. And the thing is that even though it plays a lot better on the Steam version, you have to understand the free-to-play mechanics on the mobile version only really dealt with having to, like, continue on and run and things like that. Really, I didn't see any mechanics, at least from the limited time I spent on the mobile version, that really forced you to pay for anything at this point, other than if you got really far in a run, failed, and you want to go on a little bit further. In the end, unfortunately, I won't be giving my recommendation for Cardinal Quest 2, especially at the $15 price point. If you want a game like this, I would recommend the Enchanted Cave 2 or even Talamir, as I mentioned before. But unfortunately here, there's just not enough behind the scenes here to really get excited for. Yeah, sure, the base combat's alright. Yeah, it's very simplistic, but does do some good in terms of the design. But it doesn't flash anywhere. It doesn't have that sort of knockout punch that I always talk about. And in the end, it's just sort of ho-hum, and for $15, again, you'll find a lot better elsewhere. Alright, this is Dragnix signing out. I hope you got an idea of what Cardinal Quest 2 had to offer. Again, I will leave my Steam review in the description below. It does help if you do vote yes or no, depending on whether you like this review, so that I understand what did well and what didn't do well in terms of this video. Again, like this video or dislike it, depending on if you liked or disliked this content. And if you want more content and reviews like this, hit that subscribe button. Again, I'm trying to make a career of this, and it does help to get those numbers up. Alright, I will see you all later. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this content and want to see more of it, you may want to hit that subscribe button on the left hand side. If you like this video and want to see more of this content, take a look at this video on the left hand side as well. And if you missed my last video, take a look at the right hand side. Once again, thanks for watching, and keep on gaming.